Hello friends and welcome back. My name is Kari and today I would love to share some tips on how to bake with einkorn flour. If you have never tried baking with a whole grain, einkorn flour is the perfect starter whole grain to start baking with because in many cases you can use cup for cup einkorn flour in place of all-purpose flour. And the cheapest place to buy it that I have found is off Azure Standard. However, you can also purchase this at your local health food market or Amazon or what have you. So einkorn flour is an ancient grain, and in most recipes I have found, you can use it 1-to-1 ratio just like you would all-purpose flour. So this leads me to my first big tip is to use einkorn flour for your quick breads or your soft breads. So think cookies, cakes, pancakes, anything that doesn't need to bulk rise like a bread would, because einkorn's gluten structure is much weaker than regular wheat flour. So use them in recipes that you would need a soft and not so risen product. I have successfully used einkorn flour in pancakes, pasta, cookies, all kinds of cookies. Any quick breads like a zucchini bread or a banana bread would do just fine as well. This leads me to my second tip, however. You may try a cookie recipe, for instance, and use the 1-to-1 ratio of einkorn flour to all-purpose flour, and it turns out a little bit wetter than your normal recipe because the moisture content is higher. So einkorn flour tends to absorb less moisture than your typical flours. So if you do find this to be the case, what I would recommend, and now this leads me to my second tip, is to reduce the amount of moisture content in your recipe by 10 to 20%. So in some recipes, take for instance pancakes, it might be as simple as reducing the amount of milk that you use. It might be that simple, or it might be a cookie recipe where the only moisture content is coming from butter, in which case my favorite tip is to brown the butter, and that will reduce the moisture content by at least 15, but anywhere from 15 to 20% depending on how long you brown your butter. And bonus points, browned butter cookies are the best in my opinion. So those are my two biggest tips. Use them for baked goods that don't need to rise very high. And number two, use a little bit less of the moisture content if you find you do have to alter the recipe. But otherwise, baking with einkorn is such a pleasure to work with. It truly is the gateway flour, if you will, to cooking and baking with whole grains, which in and of itself is a whole different arena of baking that is can be quite complicated at times, especially when you're substituting for 100% whole grain. So I'm going to share with you a couple of the cookies that I made over Christmas, but I've made all kinds of cookies, thumbprint cookies, I've made shortbread cookies, chocolate chip cookies, and if you've never had einkorn flour before, it tastes reminiscent of corn, so it is a slightly sweet flour that lends itself perfectly to desserts. So this was a sourdough chocolate chip cookie, which ended up being my favorite version of a chocolate chip cookie. Something about the einkorn and the chocolate are just a match made in heaven. And these were some cutout cookies that turned out just as great. Okay guys, I hope you enjoyed watching this. If you've tried your own einkorn recipes, leave a comment down below. I will see you guys next time.